They fired me to steal my $45,000 medical bonus, rerouting the cash to rent a luxury yacht for their executives. They expected me to quietly pack my desk and cry. Instead, I used a basic consumer privacy law to legally rip the foundation out of their $70 million artificial intelligence system. I did not hack them. I just watched from my couch as their arrogant vice president locked himself inside his own digital nightmare. Welcome back to Boss Revenge Stories. Everyone, we hate to ask, but YouTube recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the budget to keep operating. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so our team can pay their living expenses and continue creating these videos for you. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment. Now, let me introduce myself. My name is Sienna Howard, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I destroyed a tech empire from my living room couch. Austin, Texas is aggressively marketed as a shining neon utopia for tech innovators. But inside the soundproof glass walls of Ethos Dynamics, it was nothing but a high-pressure sterilization chamber. The air conditioning always ran too cold, freezing the sweat on my neck as I stared at glowing monitors for hours on end. I am 34 years old, and my official title was Lead Biometric Systems Architect. Unofficially, I was the exhausted mechanic keeping a doomed spaceship from exploding. Over the past 4 years, my bloodstream had essentially become a toxic mixture of bitter burnt espresso and the jagged adrenaline of continuous sleepless nights. Ethos was a private cybersecurity startup soaring on media hype, and my engineering team was trapped in the engine room, shoveling coal while the executives popped champagne on the upper deck. The lifeblood of this entire company was a project called Aegis Gate. It was not just another facial recognition toy. It was pitched as a revolutionary artificial intelligence system designed for real-time security risk analysis. The software was supposed to read a crowd, map facial geometry, analyze micro-expressions, cross-reference threat databases, and authorize or lock down physical doors in milliseconds. It was the holy grail of corporate and governmental security. And in exactly 1 week, Ethos was taking my baby to a massive investor demo in front of venture capitalists to secure a Series B funding round of $70 million. I did not care about the $70 million. The company could burn for all I cared. My loyalty was bought and paid for by a much smaller, infinitely more vital number, $45,000. That was the exact amount of my retention bonus, a clause I had negotiated in blood, guaranteed upon the successful delivery of the beta phase. I had surrendered my early 30s to this company. I missed holidays. I missed dates. I missed the feeling of sunlight on my skin. I endured it all because that $45,000 was not going toward a down payment on a luxury condo. It was the precise out-of-pocket cost for my mother's upcoming open-heart surgery back in my rural hometown. The insurance companies had denied her coverage for the specific valve replacement she needed. Without my bonus, my mother was going to die. It was that simple. Every line of Python I wrote, every neural pathway I optimized, was quite literally a heartbeat for the woman who raised me. That absolute desperation was the only reason I had not already driven my car through the lobby windows, mostly because of a man named Julian. Julian was 29 years old and held the absurd title of Vice President of Product Development. In reality, he was a walking billboard for nepotism, having secured his corner office solely because his uncle was a major player on our board of directors. Julian was the kind of guy who strutted through the engineering floor wearing impeccably tailored Tom Ford suits, choking the air with expensive cologne and an aura of entirely unearned arrogance. He communicated exclusively in hollow, regurgitated tech buzzwords that he probably skimmed from an airline magazine. We really need to optimize the blockchain synergy of the neural mesh. Sienna, he would say, leaning over my desk while I tried to untangle thousands of lines of failing code. Make sure the algorithm is disrupting the cloud paradigm. The man could not tell the difference between a back-end server script and a recipe for oatmeal cookies. Yet, he was the one slated to stand on stage and take all the credit for the $70 million miracle. And it truly was a miracle. though entirely a fragile one. The dark that hidden truth of Aegis Gate was that it was currently in a highly unstable beta stage. The executives had pushed the timeline up by 6 months to impress the investors, leaving my team with a half-baked neural network. Training an artificial intelligence to recognize faces perfectly in shifting light and chaotic environments requires a massive, flawless, perfectly tagged dataset. We simply did not have the time. The artificial intelligence was hallucinating, misidentifying shadows as people and locking doors randomly. To save the project, and to save my bonus, I had to do something radical. I had to force the artificial intelligence to learn faster, to stabilize the chaotic algorithm. I used my own highly complex biometric data as the ultimate calibration anchor. I mapped my own facial structure, my retinas, my vocal cadence, and my thermal signature deep into the core registry of the system. I hard-coded myself as ground zero. Every single time the artificial intelligence got confused, every time it struggled to process a face at a weird angle, it silently referenced my biometric data as the absolute standard of truth to correct its own math. I was holding the entire digital network together with my own reflection. I was, in the most literal sense possible, the living soul of the system. If you pulled my data out, the foundation would collapse, and the artificial intelligence would spiral into pure paranoid madness. Of course, Julian did not understand any of this. Julian only cared about his reflection in the mirror and his $70 million prize, and he was about to make the biggest, most arrogant mistake of his incredibly privileged life. The quarterly budget sign-off was scheduled for exactly 2 o'clock on a Tuesday inside Conference Room A. It was a sterile, soundproof glass box suspended directly above the main engineering floor like an observation deck. I sat at the edge of the freezing marble table, clutching a manila folder so tightly my knuckles had turned completely white. Across from me sat Julian, scrolling through his phone with an agonizingly slow, disinterested flick of his thumb. He wore a navy blue Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than my first car, his hair perfectly slicked back, radiating the kind of arrogant confidence that only came from generational wealth. "Julian," I started, keeping my voice as steady as humanly possible. "The beta milestone is complete. The system is stable enough for the investor demo next week. I am here to finalize the official sign-off on my retention bonus." I slid the highlighted employment contract across the vast table. Paragraph 4, Section B, $45,000, payable immediately upon delivery of the beta phase. My heart was pounding against my ribs. In my head, I was already dialing the cardiology department back home to schedule the operating room. Julian did not even bother to look at the paper. He just sighed heavily, locking his phone and sliding it into his tailored pocket. "Yeah, about that. Sienna," he said, using the tone of a parent explaining something to a slow child. "We hit a bit of a financial snag." I felt the floor drop out from beneath me. A snag. The funds were held in escrow. He steepled his fingers, putting on a grotesque mask of corporate sympathy. "The board had to make some incredibly tough calls this morning regarding the Series B marketing push. We reallocated the discretionary capital to maximize our visual footprint." "Reallocated," I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes, to make a true paradigm-shifting impact with the venture capitalists next week, we need an aggressive, high-value networking environment. We secured a 3-story luxury yacht on Lake Travis for the VIP after-party. It is going to be a totally immersive branding experience with open bars and a private chef. Unfortunately, because of the massive upfront deposit, that meant freezing all mid-level performance bonuses for this fiscal quarter." I stared at him. The soundproof room suddenly felt completely devoid of oxygen. My brain violently struggled to process the sheer, unadulterated audacity of what he had just said. "You spent my mother's heart surgery money on a boat party," I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let us not be overly dramatic, Sienna," Julian chuckled, waving his hand as if swatting away a minor annoyance. "It is a vital marketing expenditure. You will get your little bonus next year when we are flush with new venture capital. Just hang tight." The contract is not discretionary, I said, my voice rising, vibrating with a white-hot rage I had never experienced before. It is a legally binding milestone agreement. If you do not authorize that wire transfer by 5 o'clock today, I am taking this document straight to the Texas Workforce Commission. I will file a formal wage theft claim. I will notify the State Labor Board, and I will subpoena your entire marketing budget right before your precious investor demo. Julian stopped smiling. The smug, vacant look vanished instantly, replaced by something entirely predatory and cold. He leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine. Are you threatening this company? Sienna. I am demanding the money I earned with my own blood, I shot back, refusing to break eye contact. Without breaking his gaze, he reached out and pressed a heavy silver button on the intercom console. Security. We need a full escort in conference room A, right now. I froze, confusion battling the adrenaline. What are you doing? Protecting my product, Julian said, his voice dripping with venom. Because I just discovered that my lead biometric architect is actively trying to extort the company. I have every reason to believe you have intentionally injected a malicious backdoor code into the Aegis Gate beta to hold our investors hostage. That is an absolute lie, I yelled, slamming my hands flat on the marble table. You know there is no malware. I built that system from the ground up. You cannot even read the code. And now you are threatening to sabotage my demonstration if I do not pay you a random ransom of $45,000, he replied smoothly, already weaving the false narrative with terrifying ease. It is a classic disgruntled employee scenario. You are a massive security liability. The heavy glass door swung open. 2 large security guards wearing black polo shirts stepped inside the room. Through the glass, I could see that the entire engineering floor below us had gone completely dead silent. Dozens of developers had stopped typing. Every single face was staring up at the glass box, watching the execution. Sienna Howard, you are terminated. Effective immediately, Julian declared, raising his voice just enough to ensure it carried through the open door to the floor below. Your access to all Aetherist networks is permanently revoked. By firing you for cause, your bonus clause is officially null and void. Furthermore, if you breathe a single word of this incident to the press, the labor board, or any of your former colleagues, Aetherist Dynamics will crush you in federal court. We will sue you for corporate espionage, and you will spend the next 10 years drowning in legal fees. You will never work in tech again. He turned to the burly men standing behind me. Take her corporate badge. Confiscate her laptop. Do not let her touch another keyboard or server rack in this building. One of the guards stepped forward, holding out a thick hand. I need your ID lanyard, ma'am. I stood there, vibrating with a chaotic mixture of shock and pure, concentrated hatred. I reached around my neck, unclipped the plastic badge, and dropped it into the guard's hand. I looked down at the engineering floor one last time. My team was watching, wide-eyed and absolutely terrified of speaking up. Julian stood up, casually buttoning his ridiculously expensive suit jacket, looking down his nose at me as if I were nothing more than a stain on the carpet. He really thought he had won. He really thought he could just step on my throat, steal my mother's lifeline, and walk away to drink champagne on his yacht. The walk back to my desk under the heavy escort of the 2 security guards was supposed to be my walk of shame. I could feel the eyes of every single engineer and junior developer burning into my back. Julian followed closely behind, arms crossed, waiting for the inevitable breakdown. He wanted me to scream. He wanted me to drop to my knees and beg for my job. He was practically vibrating with the anticipation of a messy, hysterical reaction that he could use to justify his sudden, brutal termination to the rest of the floor. I did not give him a single drop of satisfaction. I felt an icy, terrifying calmness wash over my entire nervous system. The panic about the medical bills and the betrayal instantly crystallized into pure, absolute logic. A weeping victim makes mistakes. A software architect simply finds the fatal flaw in the system. I pulled a small cardboard box from under my desk and began packing. I moved methodically, my face completely blank. I placed my ergonomic mouse inside the box. Then, my noise-canceling headphones. Finally, a ceramic coffee mug. I did not look at anyone. I did not utter a single syllable of defense or explanation. When I finished, I picked up the box and turned to face Julian. The smug, triumphant sneer on his face faltered for just a fraction of a second, replaced by a subtle flicker of genuine unease. My absolute silence unnerved him far more than a screaming match ever could. I walked past him, straight to the elevator, and rode it down to the lobby without looking back. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, harsh shadows across my living room. I did not pour a drink. I did not throw anything against the wall. I simply set my cardboard box on the kitchen counter, sat down on the sofa, and flipped open my personal laptop. Julian had threatened me with federal court if I dared to retaliate. He assumed I would try to hack into the corporate mainframe to steal the source code or plant a destructive virus. But hacking is a crime. Vandalism is a crime. I had absolutely no intention of breaking the law or giving Aetherist Dynamics a legitimate reason to throw me in prison. Instead, I decided to use the law exactly as it was written. I was going to execute a flawless act of malicious compliance. I navigated to the Public Human Resources portal of Aetherist Dynamics. Every technology company operating within our jurisdiction is legally bound by strict data privacy regulations, specifically the Consumer Privacy Act, a standard that Aetherists proudly boasted about exceeding on their marketing brochures. One of the most fundamental rights granted under this legislation is the right to erasure, commonly known as the right to be forgotten. I filled out the standard digital form with my legal name, my former employee identification number, and my home address. Then, I checked the box requesting the immediate and permanent deletion of all personal data, specifically highlighting the mandatory removal of all biometric records, facial scans, vocal prints, and retinal maps associated with my identity. Under the strict legal framework, the company was required to comply within 24 hours or face massive fines from regulatory agencies. I clicked Submit. A small green checkmark appeared on the screen, confirming the receipt of my legally binding demand. This was the trap. It was invisible, perfectly legal, and entirely lethal. My biological metrics were not just sitting in a passive employee folder. My facial geometry and eye structure were the core scaffolding of the entire artificial intelligence. Because the neural network was rushed, it relied on my specific biometric signature as its baseline calibration anchor. Every time the algorithm struggled to identify a person in the beta environment, it compared the incoming data against my flawless profile to recalibrate its spatial mapping. I was the true north of the digital compass. If a normal user requested a data deletion, the system would just erase a minor text file. But by legally forcing the system to scrub my specific biometric data, I was commanding the software to reach deep into the absolute bedrock of the artificial intelligence and rip out its primary stabilizing mechanism. The beautiful irony of it all was that I was the one who had programmed the automated legal compliance protocol. I designed the script to be ruthlessly efficient, ensuring the company never faced privacy lawsuits. The script did not ask questions. It did not alert human supervisors unless it encountered a firewall error. It simply followed the law. At exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, while Julian was likely sleeping soundly in his penthouse, the automated compliance script woke up. It received my verified legal request. It scanned the massive corporate servers, hunting down every single encrypted packet that contained my biological data. It found the core calibration files nestled deep inside the main neural network. Obediently, flawlessly, and without triggering a single security alarm, the script permanently purged the files. It wiped the baseline matrix completely clean. The structural foundation of a $70 million security system dissolved into nothingness in a matter of milliseconds. The artificial intelligence was suddenly left floating in the dark, entirely blind, with no standard of reality left to guide it. I woke up at 8 o'clock the next morning feeling something I had not experienced in 4 years thoroughly, blissfully rested. I walked into my kitchen, ground fresh espresso beans, and steamed milk to make myself a perfect, unhurried macchiato. I sat on my balcony, watching the Austin traffic crawl along the highway, and casually opened my laptop to update my professional profile. I changed my status to open to work and updated my most recent employment end date. The tech industry is a notoriously small town. Within exactly 4 hours, my phone buzzed with an incoming email from the director of recruitment at Sentinel Corp. They were the largest competitor of my former employer, the absolute heavyweight champion of the cybersecurity sector. The email contained a formal offer for a senior architect position, complete with a signing bonus and a base salary that was a full 50% higher than what I had been making previously. They even offered full premium healthcare coverage, which meant my mother's surgery was completely secured. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the rich, sweet foam, and typed out a polite acceptance letter. While I was securing my future from the comfort of my patio, the office I had just left was slowly descending into a beautiful, invisible chaos. It started with microscopic fractures in the daily routine. According to the public server health portal that the company kept online for transparency, the system was experiencing tiny hiccups. I watched the live graph from my browser. An employee would approach a secure glass door, present their face to the scanner, and the light would flash red. Access denied. A second attempt would usually force the door open, leading the remaining junior engineers to falsely assume it was just a temporary network lag or a minor server delay. They were too inexperienced to realize the system was not lagging. It was hesitating. Inside the executive suite, Julian was completely oblivious to the crumbling infrastructure beneath his feet. I knew his schedule perfectly. He was spending his entire morning trying on custom suits for the big presentation and giving an exclusive phone interview to a major business magazine. When the lead back-end developer timidly approached him to report the unusual authentication delays, Julian waved him off without even looking up from his reflection in the mirror. He gave a direct, undocumented order to initiate a force run of the entire software suite, pushing it into an artificial state of readiness for the upcoming demonstration. He commanded them to bypass standard safety checks to ensure the user interface looked slick and responsive for the investors. Sitting on my couch, I refreshed the public portal page. The incoming data was spectacular. Because Julian had forced the system to run without its underlying biometric anchor, the artificial intelligence was rapidly losing its grip on reality. I watched the facial recognition error rate spike from a manageable 0.1% to a staggering 40% in a matter of hours. The software was no longer just blind. It was developing severe digital paranoia. Without my baseline data to verify what a normal human face looked like, the algorithm began treating every shadow, every awkward angle, and every reflection as a highly sophisticated infiltration attempt. It was actively hallucinating enemies where none existed. Then, my phone buzzed again. It was an encrypted text message from a senior developer I had mentored, someone who was still trapped in the office trying to hold the pieces together. The message was frantic. "Julian is an absolute idiot," the text read. He panicked about the authentication delays. He secretly programmed a crude backdoor using his Supreme Administrator account to ensure the doors open perfectly for him during the demo tomorrow. He is bypassing the neural network entirely. I actually laughed out loud, a sharp, genuine sound that startled a bird off my balcony railing. Julian, in his infinite arrogance, thought he was being clever. He thought a simple bypass code would guarantee a smooth show for the venture capitalists. He had fundamentally misunderstood the core nature of the beast we had built. Aegis Gate was a proactive threat elimination intelligence, because it was currently in a state of extreme, uncalibrated paranoia. It was scrutinizing every single line of code for vulnerabilities. By installing a secret, unauthorized backdoor right into the main artery of the software, Julian had not created a safety net. He had just handed a highly suspicious, defensive artificial intelligence the exact digital footprint of a massive internal attack. The system was now silently categorizing his Supreme Administrator account as a Level 1 security threat. The train had officially left the station. The bridge was completely out. and Julian was far too busy admiring his own reflection to notice the cliff approaching. The evening before the $70 million demonstration, my apartment was completely quiet. The same could not be said for my phone. It started ringing precisely at 9 o'clock. I glanced at the glowing screen resting on my coffee table. It was the lead back-end developer. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, it rang again, then again. By 10 o'clock, I had 14 missed calls and a barrage of frantic text messages from 3 different junior engineers. I finally picked up on the 15th ring, pressing the phone to my ear while I poured myself a glass of cold water. "Sienna, thank God you answered," a voice stammered on the other end. It was Marcus, a 23-year-old coder who sounded like he was on the verge of hyperventilating. In the background, I could hear the muffled blare of internal system alarms echoing across the engineering floor. "Hello, Marcus," I said, keeping my tone perfectly even. "It is rather late. Sienna, you have to help us. We do not know what is happening. The artificial intelligence is completely locking down randomized data sectors. It just quarantined the entire investor presentation file, and now it is denying root access to half the server farm. Julian is screaming at everyone to override the firewalls, but the system is actively fighting back. It thinks we are a hostile threat. Please, can you just remote in and stabilize the core?" I took a slow sip of my water. "I am sorry, Marcus. I cannot do that. Please, Sienna, Julian is threatening to fire all of us if we do not fix this by midnight." "Marcus, listen to me carefully," I replied, articulating every single word with deliberate legal precision. "Your vice president of product development publicly terminated me for corporate espionage. He explicitly stated that my accessing any Ethos networks would result in immediate federal prosecution. I am no longer an employee. I cannot and will not touch company property. If I log in, I am committing a felony. You need to follow your management's directives." "But we do not know how to fix it," he pleaded. "Then I suggest you ask the man who fired the person who built it. Good night, Marcus." I ended the call and switched my phone to silent. I went to bed and slept better than I had in half a decade. I woke up naturally around 4 o'clock in the morning. When I checked my screen, I had over 60 missed calls. The most recent ones were not from the engineering team. They were from the executive suite. At 4:15, the screen lit up again. The caller ID displayed the name Richard. He was the chief executive officer of Ethos Dynamics, and more importantly, he was Julian's uncle, the man who had financed the entire operation. I answered the call, putting it on speakerphone as I sat up in the dark. "This is Sienna." "Sienna," Richard barked. His voice was raw, stripped entirely of its usual polished, boardroom arrogance. It was the sound of a man watching his entire empire burn to the ground. "Sienna, what the hell is going on with the software? We are 6 hours away from the biggest venture capital pitch in the history of this company, and the entire neural network has gone completely rogue. Julian says you planted a virus before you left." "Julian is lying to cover up his own incompetence," I stated calmly. "I did not plant anything. I packed my desk and walked out, exactly as he ordered." "Listen to me," Richard pleaded, his tone shifting from anger to absolute desperation. The panic in his breath was palpable over the cellular network. "I do not care whose fault it is right now. We are hemorrhaging access right and left. The system will not even let us into the staging environment. I need you to log in and fix this bug right now. If you do, I will personally wire you your $45,000 retention bonus this very second. I will even throw in an additional $100,000 as an emergency consulting fee. You will have the money before the sun comes up. Just fix it." A month ago, an offer of $145,000 would have made me cry with relief. Now, it just sounded incredibly pathetic. "Richard, there is no bug to fix," I explained, speaking slowly as if addressing a confused elderly man. "The system is functioning exactly as it was designed to. It is doing exactly what the law requires. When your nephew fired me to steal my medical bonus, I submitted a standard legal privacy request. The system simply removed my biometric data to comply with federal regulations. The artificial intelligence is not broken, it is just blind, and it is violently rejecting your nephew's unauthorized access attempts. There was a long, horrifying silence on the other end of the line as the reality of the situation crashed down on the chief executive. "He fired you over the retention bonus," Richard whispered, his voice trembling. "Yes, he told me the funds had been reallocated to rent a luxury yacht for your after-party. I suppose you can try showing the investors the boat instead of the software." "That stupid, arrogant boy," Richard hissed, the realization turning into pure venom. I could hear him moving, likely storming down the executive hallway. "Julian, get over here right now," he screamed away from the receiver. I listened as the uncle tore into his nephew. "She pulled her data. The whole foundation is gone because you wanted a boat, you stupid, arrogant child. Uncle Richard, I can fix it." Julian's voice echoed faintly in the background, high-pitched and frantic. "I still have my Supreme Administrator backdoor. If we just purge the active memory, it will reset to default. I will force a hard reset right now." "Then do it," Richard roared. "Hard reset the entire server farm immediately. Do whatever it takes to get those doors open for the demonstration." "Wait, Uncle, if I hard reset without a calibration anchor, the security protocols might fail." "I said do it right now," Richard bellowed. I reached out and ended the call. The silence returned to my apartment, thick and immensely satisfying. I leaned back against my pillows and smiled in the dark. They were actually going to do it. They were going to force a hard reset on a profoundly paranoid artificial intelligence. They did not understand the basic architecture of their own product. A hard reset was an emergency measure designed for absolute catastrophic failures, like a physical breach of the server room. Without my baseline data to tell the system everything was safe, rebooting the neural network would immediately convince the software that it was under a massive, coordinated cyber attack. The system would not just restart. A hard reset would instantly trigger the ultimate defensive measure. It would activate the lockdown protocol. Julian was about to hand the artificial intelligence a loaded gun and beg it to pull the trigger. I closed my eyes, visualizing the absolute spectacular disaster that was waiting for them at the convention center, and I peacefully waited for the sun to rise. The Austin Convention Center was an absolute cathedral of glass and steel, packed entirely to the brim. Hundreds of venture capitalists, angel investors, and elite technology reporters sat in the darkened auditorium. The atmosphere was electric, with the promise of a $70 million revolution. I watched the live stream from the comfort of my own laptop, sipping a perfectly brewed cup of coffee as the camera panned across the massive crowd. On the center stage stood a giant, reinforced metal security door, rigged with the Aegis gate scanner, and standing right in front of it was Julian. He was wearing a brand-new, custom-tailored charcoal suit, his hair perfectly styled, holding a microphone with the relaxed, effortless grip of a man who believed he was about to conquer the entire world. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian's voice echoed through the massive speaker system, smooth and dripping with unearned confidence. For decades, corporate security has been reactive. Today, Aetherist Dynamics makes it proactive. The Aegis Gate artificial intelligence is completely foolproof. It cannot be tricked. It cannot be bypassed. It knows exactly who belongs, and more importantly, it knows exactly who is a threat. He smiled for the flashing cameras, turning his body toward the colossal metal door. "Allow me to demonstrate the fastest, most secure biometric authentication in human history." Julian confidently stepped up to the terminal and leaned his face toward the scanning lens. For 2 agonizingly long seconds, absolutely nothing happened. The auditorium was dead silent. Then, the massive 50-inch light-emitting diode screen positioned directly behind the door did not flash the welcoming green light of approval. Instead, it erupted into a violent, blinding crimson red. The color washed over Julian's perfectly tailored suit, turning him into a terrifying, blood-soaked silhouette. Because Julian had forced a hard reset on a system completely devoid of its baseline calibration anchor. The artificial intelligence had woken up in a state of ultimate digital terror. It did not recognize his face. Furthermore, because it was actively hunting for the source of the traumatic reset, it immediately detected the unauthorized administrator backdoor that Julian had secretly coded into the terminal. A loud mechanical buzzer shattered the silence of the auditorium. The screen behind him displayed massive, bold white text over the red background: Level 1 threat detected. Hostile intruder protocol engaged. Julian froze. He tapped the side of the scanner, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. Just a minor interface delay. Folks, the security is highly sensitive. He leaned in to scan his face a second time. That was the final nail in the coffin. Aegis Gate was not just a lock. It was a proactive threat elimination intelligence. When it identified a high-level hostile intruder exploiting a digital backdoor, its core programming dictated that it must immediately neutralize the threat by exposing the attacker to security personnel. The 50-inch screen violently shifted. It did not just deny him entry, it automatically extracted the entire digital footprint of the hacker who had created the backdoor and blasted it onto the stadium screen for every single investor to see. A collective, horrified gasp echoed through the convention center. The screen rapidly scrolled through high-resolution images of Julian's private corporate emails. There, in letters 2 feet tall, was an email thread detailing exactly how Julian had systematically embezzled company funds to pay for luxury car leases. It was immediately followed by a direct message log where he explicitly ordered junior developers to illegally delete system error reports to defraud the venture capitalists in the room. Finally, the artificial intelligence ruthlessly pulled up the administrative account's web browsing history, projecting a horrifying list of illegal, highly explicit websites that Julian had been visiting on company time. "Turn it off!" Julian screamed, dropping his microphone. His voice cracked in pure panic. He frantically clawed at the scanner panel, trying to physically rip the power cord out of the podium. "Shut the screen off!" The artificial intelligence responded to his erratic physical aggression exactly as I had programmed it to respond to a violent attacker. Deafening security sirens began to wail from the ceiling speakers. Strobing red emergency lights spun wildly across the faces of the furious investors. With a synchronized, terrifyingly heavy series of mechanical thuds, the heavy magnetic locks on every single exit door of the convention auditorium engaged simultaneously. The massive screen flashed a final warning: sector lockdown initiated. Authorities dispatched. 15 minutes until release. Julian was trapped. He was locked inside a sealed room for 15 agonizing minutes with hundreds of people who had just watched him attempt to steal $70 million with a broken product, alongside undeniable proof of his own financial and moral bankruptcy. Investors were standing up, shouting furiously. Reporters were recording everything, zooming in on the catastrophic evidence burning bright on the screen. Julian sank to his knees right there on the stage, burying his face in his hands, completely and utterly destroyed. I gently closed my laptop screen. The show was over. By noon the following day, Aetheris Dynamics was dead. The venture capital firm officially pulled every single cent of their funding. The board of directors held an emergency meeting to dissolve the company. Federal investigators raided the office before lunch, seizing Julian's computer and freezing his assets pending a massive investigation into wire fraud and corporate embezzlement, all of which had been conveniently packaged and publicly presented by his own artificial intelligence. As for me, I was sitting comfortably in my brand-new, spacious corner office at Sentinel Core. I had just finished setting up my dual monitors and was enjoying a large glass of iced peach tea. The view of the Austin skyline from my window was absolutely breathtaking. Before I started my new, highly lucrative assignments, I decided to tie up one final loose end. I opened a blank email, addressed it to Richard, the now disgraced former chief executive, and typed a very brief message. "Hello, Richard. I noticed the demonstration encountered a catastrophic calibration failure resulting in a lockdown. For future reference, there is a simple protocol to prevent this. I attached a link to a public, unencrypted corporate drive folder. The timestamp showed the file had been created exactly 6 months ago. It was an extensive, step-by-step emergency manual on how to properly build a secondary, synthetic biometric anchor to keep the neural network stable in the event of catastrophic data loss. It was the exact manual I had explicitly handed to Julian 6 months prior. He had thrown it directly into the trash can right in front of my face because he said it was way too long to read. Every single bit of their destruction, the lost $70 million, the shattered company, the criminal charges, all of it could have been entirely avoided if they had simply respected the person who built their world. I hit send, took a long, refreshing sip of my peach tea, and got back to work. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story today. I would love to know where you are listening from, so please let me know your city or country in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and felt the satisfaction of seeing justice served, please consider helping our team with just a $1 donation. You can simply scan the PayPal QR code on your screen right now, or use the PayPal link provided in the description and pinned comment. Your support directly pays the salaries of our incredible staff, helping them feed their families and allowing us to keep bringing you these high-quality revenge stories every single week. Thank you again, and we will see you in the next video.